A sick little girl asks a single dad to open a small box, but when he looks inside, he uncovers a secret that changes both of their lives forever. Mark had always been a man of routine. Every morning he would wake up early, brew a strong cup of coffee, and quietly prepare his daughter Emma's breakfast before she got ready for school. Being a single dad was not easy, but he had learned to balance work and parenting as best as he could. His job at the small delivery company kept him busy, but he always made time for Emma, especially after school. It was their time to laugh, talk, and forget, even for a few hours. About the stress of their separate worlds, one warm afternoon, Mark decided to take Emma to the small park near their apartment. The park wasn't fancy, but it had swings, a slide, and a few benches where parents often sat while their children played. The sun shone gently through the trees, casting moving patterns of light and shadow on the ground. The air smelled faintly of fresh grass and blooming flowers, a quiet reminder that life could be simple and beautiful sometimes. Emma ran ahead, laughing loudly as she swung higher and higher, her ponytail flying in the breeze. Mark smiled, enjoying the carefree sound of her laughter. He leaned against a bench, sipping water. Watching her play and listening to the occasional bark of a dog or the chirp of birds, while he was enjoying the calm, Mark noticed a small figure approaching him from the other side of the park. It was a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She walked slowly, carefully, as if each step required effort. Her clothes were a little worn, and her hair fell in soft, messy strands around her pale face. She looked sick, not just tired, but weak in a way that made Mark's heart tighten. There was something fragile about her presence, something that made him pause mid-breath and pay attention. She held a small package in her hands, clutching it tightly, almost as if it were the most precious thing she owned. When she reached the bench, she hesitated. Mark noticed the nervous way she twisted the package in her small hands. Her eyes, a strange mix of fear and hope, met his. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Can you open this?" There was no hesitation in her words, but there was something in the way she said them that made Mark instantly alert. He wasn't expecting to be asked to open anything by a stranger, especially a little girl who looked so delicate. Mark shifted slightly, giving her a gentle smile. "Of course I can," he said, trying to sound calm and friendly. "But why me? Why are you asking me?" The girl looked down at the package, as if she had been thinking about that for a long time. Her small lips quivered, and she finally said, I can't. It's stuck. Please. I need someone to help." She looked back at him, pleading, her eyes wide and serious. Mark felt a mix of curiosity and concern. Something about her made him feel like she wasn't just asking for a small favor. There was a bigger story behind those words, a story she couldn't yet put into full sentences. He knelt down to her level, careful not to scare her. "Okay," he said softly. "I can help you. But I need to know. Is this something important? Something that might hurt you if it's opened the wrong way?" The girl shook her head quickly, her frail fingers tightening around the package. "No, it's not. It's important. But not bad. I can't open it." Mark noticed her hands were trembling slightly. It wasn't just the weight of the package. There was fear in her small movements. Something inside him told him that this girl had been carrying more than just a package. Mark glanced at Emma, who was now watching from the swing with curiosity. He waved subtly to her, signaling that he was okay, and returned his attention to the girl. "All right," he said. "I'm going to help you, but I want you to tell me your name first." The girl hesitated, then whispered Lily. "Lily," Mark repeated, letting the name linger in the air as if saying it would somehow make him understand her better. Mark, I'm going to help you, Lily. Can you tell me how this package got stuck?" Lily's gaze dropped to the ground, and she shuffled her feet. I was told not to open it. But it's too hard. I tried, and I can't." Her voice was soft, almost fading into the park's background noise of children laughing and dogs barking. Mark noticed the way her small shoulders hunched as if she were carrying a heavy burden on top of her sickness. He reached out gently, taking the package from her hands. It was small, about the size of a lunchbox, wrapped in brown paper, with no markings except a small heart drawn on the corner. There was something simple, yet strangely meaningful about it. Mark examined it carefully. Okay, he said. I think I can help. He set the package on his lap and pulled out his keys and a small tool from his pocket, the kind he always carried for fixing things around the house. He smiled to keep her calm. I've opened boxes and packages many times. I promise to be careful. Lily's eyes followed his hands as he gently started trying to loosen the wrapping. She didn't speak. She just watched, her small chest rising and falling quickly, as if she were holding her breath as he worked. Mark tried to make her feel comfortable. You know, Lily, it's not every day that someone trusts a stranger with something so important. You must be very brave. She looked at him, a small, shy smile appearing for the first time. I have to be, she whispered. Mark nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and concern. There was a seriousness in her small frame that reminded him of Emma when she was faced with challenges she didn't fully understand. Finally, with a soft click, the package began to loosen. Mark carefully pulled at the edges, making sure not to tear anything inside. Lily's eyes widened slightly and she leaned in closer, as if she were afraid he might accidentally ruin what was inside. Mark's heart ached a little at the thought of a sick little girl worrying so much over something so small, yet so precious to her. He had no idea what was waiting inside, but he knew it would matter. Mark looked at Lily and said gently, "Almost there. Just a little more, okay?" She nodded, biting her lip, her eyes following every move he made. For a few minutes, the park seemed to fall away. It was just the two of them, a man and a little girl, connected by something fragile and important that was about to be revealed. Mark felt a strange mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Whatever was in that package, he sensed it was going to be more than just a box with papers or toys. Finally, the wrapping loosened completely, and Mark carefully lifted the cover. Lily gasped softly, her eyes wide as she looked at him. Mark froze for a moment, because what he saw inside made him stop and really focus on this little girl standing in front of him. There was a story here, a hidden part of her life that he hadn't expected. And even though he didn't yet know all the details, he realized one thing immediately. Helping her wasn't just about opening a package. It was about being there for her, in the way a stranger sometimes becomes a guardian. Even for a moment, Mark looked at Lily, still kneeling in front of her, and smiled gently. "Thank you for trusting me," he said softly. "I'm glad you asked me." Lily's shoulders relaxed slightly, and she gave him a faint, tired smile. In that moment, the park didn't feel like just a place to play. It was a place where something important had begun, a moment that would change both their days forever. Mark gently held the small package in his hands, carefully examining it as Lily's thin fingers rested lightly on the edges. The park seemed quieter now, the usual laughter of children and barking of dogs fading into the background as Mark focused on the girl in front of him. She was small, fragile, and clearly unwell. Her cheeks were pale, and the slight cough that occasionally escaped her throat made him worry. There was something about her, a quiet strength mixed with fear, made him want to help her even more. "Lily," he said softly, "can you tell me what's inside this package?" She shook her head quickly. "No. No one is supposed to see it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark nodded, understanding that whatever was inside was important to her, personal and possibly private. But his curiosity, mixed with concern, made him look closer. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper, with the corners slightly worn. There was a small heart drawn in red pen on one side, and a tiny piece of tape held it all together. It didn't look dangerous, but Mark could tell that this wasn't just a toy or a random item. "Okay? Lily," he said, trying to keep his voice calm and friendly. "I won't do anything until you tell me you're ready." She hesitated, biting her lip, then slowly nodded. I think I can trust you," she said, her eyes filling with a mix of hope and fear. Mark smiled gently. "Thank you for trusting me," he said. "I promise I'll be very careful." He carefully started opening the edges of the paper, making sure not to tear anything inside. Lily watched closely, her eyes wide, her hands trembling slightly as she held the package steady. As he worked, Mark tried to make conversation to keep her calm. "So, Lily," he said softly, "do you come to this park often?" She shook her head. "Not really. My mom. She's usually busy. And my dad. He's not around." Mark nodded, understanding. Being a single parent himself, he could sense that Lily's family situation was complicated. "Well," he said, "I'm glad you came here today. Sometimes parks are the best place to think and feel safe." Lily's lips curved into a small, shy smile. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. Mark continued to open the package carefully. And as the layers of paper loosened, he noticed something inside that caught his attention. It wasn't just a toy or a piece of paper, it was something personal, something that told a story. A small notebook fell into his hands, covered in drawings and writing. The drawings were simple, but full of emotion. Stick figures of a little girl, a small house, flowers, and clouds. Some pictures were bright and cheerful, but others looked sad, with dark scribbles covering the page. Mark could feel the story behind them, story of a child trying to express feelings. She couldn't say out loud. Lily watched nervously as Mark looked through the pages. He noticed that some of the pages had words written in a shaky, small handwriting. She had written about being sick, about being lonely, and about feeling scared at home. Mark's heart ached. He had never met this little girl before, but he already felt a protective instinct rise inside him. He realized that Lily had been carrying these feelings alone, trying to make sense of them in her own quiet way. "Lily," he said gently, "these drawings, they're very special. You've done an amazing job expressing yourself." She looked down, her fingers fiddling with the corner of her dress. I don't know if anyone cares," she whispered. Mark shook his head firmly. "I care, Lily, and I think anyone who sees this will care too. You're very brave to put your feelings on paper like this." Her eyes brightened a little, and for the first time, she seemed a little less afraid. Mark carefully put the notebook back into the package and looked at her. "I have to ask," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Are you feeling okay? You don't look very well." Lily's eyes dropped to the ground. I've been sick for a while," she admitted quietly. "Sometimes I can't go to school. And sometimes I just stay in my room." Mark nodded, his concern growing. He had seen children who were sick, but something about her small frame and tired eyes told him that she needed help. "Lily," he said gently, "I think you might need someone to help you feel better. Maybe a doctor, or someone who can take care of you." She shook her head quickly. "No, I don't want anyone. I don't want to bother anyone," she whispered, her voice small and frightened. Mark smiled softly, trying to reassure her. "You're not bothering anyone, Lily. You deserve help, and it's okay to ask for it. I promise no one will be upset with you for wanting to feel better." Lily looked at him, her eyes wide and uncertain. "But I can't go alone," she said. Mark nodded. He understood completely. Children, especially those who were sick or scared, needed someone they trusted to guide them. He offered his hand gently. "You don't have to go alone. I'll help you. We can figure this out together." Lily hesitated for a moment, then slowly took his hand. Her small fingers fit into his larger ones, and Mark felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. They sat together on the bench for a few more minutes, Lily holding the package tightly on her lap. Mark tried to learn more about her situation without scaring her. She told him little bits. She lived with her mom, who was often busy with work, and her dad wasn't in the picture. She had a younger brother who she tried to take care of when she could, but her sickness made everything harder. Mark listened carefully, nodding and asking gentle questions, showing her that he genuinely cared. As they talked, Mark noticed that Lily's voice, though weak, held a certain resilience. She had been through struggles, but she hadn't given up. She was brave in a quiet, almost invisible way. Mark realized that children like Lily often went unnoticed, their difficulties hidden behind small smiles or polite behavior. He wanted to make sure that her struggles didn't go unnoticed. Finally, after some time, Mark looked at Lily and said, "Lily, I think we need to get someone to help you with your sickness and make sure you're safe and healthy. You don't have to do this alone." She looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. I I don't know if I can trust anyone, she admitted. Mark nodded gently. I understand, but I promise you I'll be here with you. You can trust me, and we'll take this one step at a time. For the first time, Lily seemed to relax a little. She leaned slightly closer to him, her small frame trembling, but her trust growing. Mark knew this was the beginning of something important. He didn't yet know the full story of her life or the challenges she faced, but he knew he could help her in some way. The small package, the notebook, the drawings, they were all pieces of her story, and he was now a part of it. The park, once just a simple place for play, had become a space of trust and connection. Mark felt a responsibility he hadn't anticipated. He realized that sometimes helping someone wasn't about grand gestures or big plans. It was about listening, understanding, and offering a hand when someone was too small or too scared to take the next step on their own. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the grass, Mark stood up carefully, holding the package and the notebook. Come on, Lily, he said softly. Let's go somewhere safe and figure out the next step together. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded, taking his hand tightly. Mark felt the weight of her trust and the importance of his actions. He knew that today, something had started, something that could change her life, and maybe even his, forever. Mark held Lily's hand tightly as they walked slowly toward a quieter part of the park, away from the swings and laughter of other children. His mind was racing. He still didn't know exactly what was inside the small package, but something about it told him it was more than a simple notebook or toy. He could see the tension in Lily's small body, the way her fingers clutched the package like it contained her whole world. Mark wanted to make her feel safe, so he kept his voice gentle and calm. We're going somewhere safe, Lily, he said. I promise. You don't have to be scared. Lily glanced up at him briefly, her pale eyes full of uncertainty. I've never really told anyone about this, she admitted softly. Mark nodded, understanding completely. Some stories are too heavy for a child to carry alone, and sometimes it takes a stranger, someone without expectations or judgments, to listen. It's okay, Lily, he said. You can tell me as much or as little as you want. I'm here to help. She took a deep breath, her tiny chest rising and falling quickly. Finally, they sat down on a small bench tucked beneath the shade of an old oak tree. The cool shade felt comforting, like a temporary shield from the world. Mark placed the package carefully on his lap and looked at her. Are you ready to show me what's inside? Lily hesitated, then nodded. Yes, but please be careful, she whispered. Mark smiled reassuringly. I'll be very careful, I promise. Slowly, he lifted the paper wrapping, revealing a small, plain box underneath. It was unremarkable from the outside, but he could feel that whatever was inside mattered greatly to Lily. Carefully, he opened the lid. His eyes widened slightly as he saw the contents. It wasn't what he expected. Inside were medical papers, small vials, and a few notes written in a child's handwriting. The papers had information about tests, medications, and appointments. And the notes detailed Lily's experiences, how she felt weak, how she had difficulty eating, and how she had been struggling with her sickness for months. Mark felt a jolt of shock. He had expected a small notebook or a drawing, something personal but not alarming. Seeing the medical documents and notes, he realized the severity of the situation. Lily had been trying to manage her sickness alone, without proper support, and clearly she had been afraid to ask for help. His heart ached. He looked at her, seeing the fear and relief in her eyes. I didn't know anyone would see this, she whispered. You're very brave, Lily, Mark said softly. I know it's scary to share something like this, but I promise, I'm here to help. You're not alone anymore. Lily's eyes filled with tears and she clutched the package tightly. I don't want anyone to be mad at me, she said, her voice trembling. Mark shook his head. No one will be mad. You did the right thing by asking for help. That's the bravest thing you could do. He carefully looked through the notes. Some of them described her symptoms in detail. Constant fatigue, dizziness, and pain. Others were simple observations, like how she sometimes struggled to get out of bed or how her stomach hurt after meals. There were also notes about moments of fear, sadness, and loneliness. Mark realized that Lily had been keeping a detailed record of her life, documenting what she could not say out loud. The honesty and courage in her notes were overwhelming. Mark reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "Lily, I think you need medical attention as soon as possible. This isn't something you should face alone. You deserve care, and you deserve to feel better." Lily looked down, biting her lip. I don't know if anyone will help me. My mom. She's busy, and sometimes she doesn't understand." Mark nodded slowly, understanding. "Then we'll make sure someone does understand. We'll take the right steps together. I'll help you, Lily. You won't have to do this alone." Lily's small hand gripped his, her trust in him growing. "But what if they don't believe me?" she asked quietly. Mark smiled gently. "I believe you, Lily, and I will make sure the right people believe you too. You are not making this up, and you are not alone anymore." Her eyes filled with hope, a small glimmer in the midst of her fear. Mark thought about what he needed to do next. He couldn't just sit on the bench and worry. He had to take action. He needed to contact a doctor, maybe even social services, to make sure Lily got the care she desperately needed. But he also needed to be careful, to gain her trust fully before taking any steps that might frighten her. He wanted to act in a way that made her feel safe, not scared. He took a deep breath and asked gently, "Lily, would it be okay if I take you to a doctor or a nurse? Someone who can check on you and make sure you're okay?" She hesitated, looking down at the papers in her lap. I'm scared," she admitted. Mark nodded, understanding completely. It's okay to be scared. But being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared. It means you face the fear with someone you trust, and I'm right here with you. Lily looked up at him, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and hope. She nodded slowly. "Okay. If you come with me," she said. Mark smiled softly. "Of course I'll come with you. We'll figure this out together." He carefully packed the medical papers and vials back into the box, making sure everything was secure. Lily watched him the entire time, her small hands resting on the edge of the bench. Mark could feel the weight of her trust, the responsibility that had just fallen into his hands. He knew this was bigger than just helping a child open a package. This was about protecting her, guiding her, and making sure she received the care she had been denied for too long, as they prepared to leave the park. Mark took a moment to look around. The sun was starting to lower, casting long, warm shadows across the grass. Children were still playing, but for Mark, the world felt different now. He had met Lily, a little girl carrying a burden far too heavy for her age. He had seen her strength, her fear, and her courage all at once, and he knew that whatever lay ahead would not let her face it alone. Mark led Lily carefully toward his car, making sure her steps were steady. "We're going to get you help, Lily," he said softly, "and you're going to be okay. You'll see." She looked up at him, her small lips trembling into a tentative smile. "You really think so?" she asked. "I do," Mark replied firmly. "I promise you we'll make this right." The ride to the clinic was quiet, Lily leaning slightly against him, the box resting on her lap. Mark kept glancing at her, making sure she was comfortable, speaking softly when she seemed nervous. Every now and then, she would peek inside the box, checking that everything was still there, but mostly, she seemed to relax a little with his presence. By the time they arrived at the clinic, Lily was still shy and nervous, but her trust in Mark had grown enough that she was willing to step inside. He held her hand as they walked through the doors, explaining softly what would happen and reassuring her that everything was okay. Mark felt a strong sense of purpose. He had been shaken by what he saw in that small package, but he also felt a determination he had never felt before. He would do whatever it took to help this little girl. Inside, the nurse greeted them kindly, and Mark explained the situation carefully, making sure Lily felt included in every step. Lily watched quietly, still holding on to him, but there was a small spark of hope in her eyes. Mark could see at the first sign that maybe, just maybe, things could get better, As they sat in the clinic waiting area, Mark glanced at Lily and smiled softly. "You're very brave, you know," he said. "You faced so much all by yourself, and now you're letting someone help. That's incredible." Lily blushed slightly, looking down at her hands. I just didn't know what else to do," she admitted. Mark shook his head gently. "Sometimes the bravest thing is asking for help. And today, you did exactly that." In that quiet moment, Mark realized that opening the package had revealed much more than medical papers. It had revealed Lily's courage, her fear, and her silent struggle. And it had revealed something to him as well, the importance of noticing the small signals, the quiet cries for help that too often go unseen. Mark stayed close to Lily as they waited in the clinic, keeping a careful eye on her. The little girl clutched the box of her medical papers tightly on her lap, and he could feel the trembling of her small hands through his own. She was quiet now, no longer talking much, but the tension in her body told him everything. He knew she was scared, not just of the clinic, but of what might happen if someone found out about her illness. He had seen this fear before in children who had been alone for too long. He was determined to make her feel safe. The nurse called them in, and Mark gently helped Lily stand. He knelt to her level and smiled. "It's okay, Lily. We're just going to make sure you're healthy. You'll be fine, I promise." Lily nodded hesitantly, holding tightly to his hand. She took small steps behind him, trusting him to guide her. Inside the examination room, the nurse gave them space, but offered a warm, reassuring smile. Mark explained quietly that Lily had been struggling with her health, and that she needed someone to help her. He made sure to include Lily in the conversation. Asking her gently to tell the nurse what she felt, Lily's voice was small at first, almost a whisper, but as she spoke about her sickness, the nurse nodded understandingly, showing that she was being heard. Mark noticed the relief on Lily's face, a tiny spark that hadn't been there before. Even though she was still nervous, she was starting to realize that asking for help wasn't dangerous, and someone actually cared about her well-being. Mark felt a sense of pride mixed with concern. He had expected to just open a package and maybe offer comfort. But now, he saw that his role was much bigger than he had imagined. After a few tests and basic examinations, the nurse looked at Mark with a serious expression. "This child needs proper medical attention, and she also needs support at home," she said. Mark nodded gravely. "I understand. We'll make sure she gets the care she needs." He turned to Lily, who had been quietly watching. "Lily," he said softly, "we're going to get you the right help. You don't have to do this alone anymore." Lily looked at him, a mix of fear and hope in her eyes. "Really?" she asked. Mark nodded firmly. "Really? You've been so brave already. Now we're going to make sure you're safe and healthy." Once the immediate medical needs were addressed, Mark knew he had to take the next step. He had to make sure Lily had a stable environment, someone to look after her regularly, and a support system that could handle both her sickness and her emotional needs. He gently explained to Lily that they might need to speak with social services. "I know that sounds scary," he said, "but it's just people who help kids like you stay safe and healthy. They want to make sure everything is okay." Lily hesitated, her small hands gripping the box nervously. "Will they take me away?" she asked. Mark shook his head. "No, they won't. They just want to help. And I'll be with you the whole time. You're not alone." Mark contacted the social worker recommended by the clinic. He explained Lily's situation in detail, including her illness, the notes and medical papers she had shown him, and the fact that she had been managing everything largely on her own. The social worker responded quickly, understanding the urgency. Within a few hours, arrangements were being made to provide immediate care and to ensure Lily had a safe environment. Mark stayed by her side the entire time, explaining each step in simple terms and reassuring her that everything would be okay through the day. Mark noticed small changes in Lily. She started to relax slightly, her shoulders uncurling, and her hands no longer trembled as much. She even gave a faint smile when the nurse asked her a simple question about her favorite color. Mark realized how much she had needed someone patient and gentle to guide her, someone she could trust completely. He also felt a deep sense of responsibility. This little girl had been carrying so much by herself, and now he was part of a plan to make sure she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. Mark spent time talking with Lily, trying to keep her mind off the fear of new people and new procedures. He asked about her favorite games, what she liked to draw, and what she wished she could do if she felt strong. Lily began to open up slowly, telling him small things she had been afraid to share with anyone else. Mark listened carefully, nodding, validating her feelings, and gently guiding her to understand that asking for help was not a weakness. By the evening, the clinic staff had prepared a plan for Lily's care, including medical treatment and follow-up visits. They'd also set up a temporary support system for her at home, making sure she would not be left alone in her fragile state. Mark reviewed the plan with Lily, explaining each part in simple terms. "This is all to make sure you feel better and stay safe," he said. "You're not alone anymore. You have people who care about you, and I'll make sure you're okay every step of the way." Lily nodded, clutching the small package close to her chest. Mark felt a strange mix of relief and determination. Relief because Lily was finally getting the care she needed, and determination because he knew that the work didn't stop here. He would need to continue supporting her emotionally, making sure she felt safe, and being an advocate for her well-being. He realized that helping someone wasn't just about solving an immediate problem, it was about staying consistent, being patient, and providing stability. As they left the clinic, Mark held Lily's hand gently, guiding her toward the car. She leaned slightly against him, tired but calmer than she had been that morning. The sun had dipped lower, painting the sky in warm colors, and the quiet of evening seemed to offer a sense of peace. Mark realized that today had been a turning point. Lily had trusted him, and he had taken action to ensure she would not have to face her challenges alone. During the ride home, Mark spoke softly to Lily, making small talk to keep her calm. She began to ask questions about what would happen next, and he answered patiently, explaining the plan for her treatment, her home care, and the people who would be there to support her. He made sure to emphasize that she had a voice, that her opinions and feelings mattered, and that she had the right to ask for help whenever she needed it. By the time they arrived at Lily's temporary safe place, a relative's house arranged by social services, she seemed slightly more relaxed. She even gave Mark a small, shy smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Mark knelt down to her level. "You don't need to thank me, Lily. You've been very brave. Just remember, you're not alone anymore. You have people who care about you, and I'll always make sure you're safe." As he watched Lily settle in, Mark felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The day had started with a simple request to open a package, but it had turned into something much bigger, a chance to protect, guide, and support a child in need. He realized that even small acts of kindness could have profound consequences, and that sometimes being in the right place at the right time meant stepping up when someone needed. Mark left the house with a quiet resolve. He knew he had done something important, but he also knew that this was just the beginning. He would continue to check on Lily, support her, and ensure she received the care and attention she deserved. The small package, the medical papers, and the trust she had placed in him had revealed not just her struggles, but also the opportunity for him to make a real difference in her life. That night, Mark reflected on the day as he returned home. He thought about Lily, about the fear she had carried alone, and the courage she had shown simply by asking for help. He thought about his own daughter, Emma, how important it was to teach her about empathy, kindness, and the power of small actions. Mark knew that the impact of today would stay with him, shaping the way he approached life and helping others in need. The next morning, Mark woke up earlier than usual. The memories of the previous day filled his mind. The park, the frightened little girl, the package, and the discovery that changed everything. He sat quietly at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. Thinking about Lily, he couldn't stop wondering how she was doing. If she had eaten breakfast, if she was feeling any better. He knew she was now in safe hands, but something inside him wouldn't let him just walk away and forget. She had come to him for help, and somehow, that small moment had created a bond that he couldn't ignore. After dropping his daughter Emma off at school, Mark decided to check in on Lily. He called the social worker and asked politely if he could visit her. The woman on the other end smiled through her voice and said, "Of course, Mr. Harris. She's been asking if you'd come by. She seems to trust you a lot." Mark felt warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you," he said. "I'll come this afternoon." When Mark arrived at the small house where Lily was staying, he was greeted by her aunt, a kind-faced woman who thanked him for everything he had done. She explained that Lily had been resting, eating small meals, and taking her medication as prescribed. "She still gets tired easily," the woman said, "but she's smiling more now. That hasn't happened in a long time." Mark smiled, relief washing over him. When Lily saw him step into the living room, her face lit up with a shy but genuine smile. She was sitting on a small couch, wrapped in a light blanket, her hair neatly brushed. "Mark," she said softly, her voice still fragile, but much brighter than before. "You came back," Mark nodded, sitting down near her. "Of course, I did. I told you I'd make sure you're okay, didn't I?" Lily nodded, clutching her blanket closer. They talked for a while about small things, her favorite books, the weather, and how Emma was doing at school. Mark noticed how different she seemed now. Her eyes were brighter, and though she still looked weak, there was a peace about her that hadn't been there before. She was healing, slowly but surely, not just in her body, but in her heart too. After a while, Lily reached beside her and picked up the same small box that had once carried her fears. It had been neatly rewrapped, and this time there was a ribbon tied around it. She held it out to Mark with both hands. "I want you to have this," she said. Mark looked surprised. "Lily, that's your box? It's very special to you." She shook her head gently. "It was special because it was all I had when I was scared. But now, I'm not scared anymore. You helped me. I want you to keep it to remember that day." Mark felt a lump in his throat as he accepted the box. "Thank you, Lily," he said quietly. "I'll treasure it. And I'll always remember how brave you were." Lily smiled softly. "You were brave too," she said. "You didn't even know me, but you helped me anyway." Mark chuckled gently. "Maybe that's what we're supposed to do, help each other, even when we don't know how big a difference it will make." As the days turned into weeks, Mark continued to visit Lily whenever he could. Sometimes he brought Emma along, and the two girls slowly became friends. They would sit together and draw, laugh softly, and talk about school and cartoons. Mark often sat nearby, watching them, feeling grateful for the strange chain of events that had brought Lily into their lives. He could see how much she had changed. She was stronger, happier, and more open. The fear that once hid behind her eyes was slowly fading, replaced by trust and hope. One sunny afternoon, as the girls drew pictures on the porch, Lily looked up at Mark and said, "You know, I think I'm going to get better. The doctor said my medicine is working." Mark smiled warmly. "That's wonderful news, Lily. I always knew you were strong." She grinned. "I don't think I was strong. I was just lucky to meet you." Mark shook his head. "No, Lily, you were strong because you asked for help. That takes real courage. You did the hardest part." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe, but it was easier when you were there." Mark felt his chest tighten again with emotion. "And I'll always be there, Lily. That's a promise." In time, Lily's health continued to improve. She began attending school again part-time, and her teachers quickly noticed how intelligent and kind she was. Her drawings, once filled with dark, sad colors, became bright and full of life. She even started to smile more often, the kind of smile that showed she was finally free from the fear that once controlled her. Mark watched her grow stronger, and every time he saw her smile, felt a quiet pride. One afternoon, months later, as Mark picked up Emma from school, Lily ran up to them from across the yard. She was laughing, her hair bouncing in the sunlight, her backpack swinging on her shoulder. "Mark!" she called happily. "Guess what? I got an award for my art project." She held up a colorful drawing of a big tree with children playing under it. "It's called The Day I Met a Hero," she said shyly. Mark looked at the drawing closely and felt his heart swell. There was a man kneeling next to a small girl under a big tree, just like the day they met in the park. He knelt down to her level and smiled warmly. "That's beautiful, Lily," he said. I'm really proud of you. Lily smiled back, her eyes glowing. I couldn't have done it without you. Mark shook his head, smiling. You did it all yourself, Lily. You just needed someone to remind you that you could. That evening, after dropping both girls home, Mark sat quietly on his porch, holding the little box Lily had given him. He opened it gently and found something new inside, a small note, written in Lily's handwriting. It read, "Thank you for opening my box. You didn't just open paper, you opened my heart." Mark read the words several times, his eyes stinging with emotion. He realized that helping Lily had changed him too. It reminded him of the power of kindness, how one small act could transform a life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark thought about how everything had started so simply. A sick little girl had walked up to him and asked, "Can you open this?" He had no idea that those 4 words would lead to something that would change both of their lives forever. He had learned that sometimes people don't ask for help with loud cries or dramatic gestures. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they just hand you a box and hope someone cares enough to open it. Mark looked up at the evening sky, feeling peaceful. He knew that life was full of unexpected moments, some challenging, some beautiful, but all meaningful in their own way. He smiled softly, thinking about Lily and Emma, about the laughter he now heard more often at home, and about the quiet satisfaction that came from doing something. It's good simply because it was the right thing to do. A few weeks later, Mark took both girls to the park, again the same place where everything began. Lily ran ahead with Emma, their laughter echoing through the trees. Mark watched them play, feeling proud and grateful. The park looked the same, but for him, it held a deeper meaning now. It wasn't just a place for play. It was a reminder that kindness could change lives in ways you never expected. When Lily came running back to him, out of breath and smiling, she said, "Mark, can you open this?" Holding out a small candy wrapper that was twisted tight. He laughed softly as he took it from her, remembering the first time she had said those exact words. But this time, her voice was full of joy, not fear. He opened the wrapper easily and handed her the candy. "There you go," he said with a grin. "See? Nothing scary about that anymore." Lily popped the candy into her mouth and smiled. "Not anymore," she said, laughing. Mark smiled back, realizing how far she had come from a frightened, sick little girl to a happy, confident child full of life. And deep down, he knew that this moment, this laughter, was the real reward for everything they had been through together. As the sun began to set behind the trees, Mark felt a quiet sense of peace. He had not only helped heal a child's body, but also her heart, and in doing so, he had healed a part of his own. Sometimes, he thought, the simplest questions could lead to the most extraordinary stories. And for him, it had all started with a small, trembling voice asking, "Can you open this?"